All right, welcome in. Welcome. Back to some game engine dev. Yesterday I did a little, 2 hour stream where I didn't really get too much done. About all I got done is what you see here, where I got the scene view to display the contents of a scene, and I got the file open scene and file close scene options to do the scene loading. If I go to close scene from here, something weird happens. The game still runs, which I think I'm actually okay with for the moment. There's another mechanism by which I will be circumventing the possibility of playing a game without a level open in the level editor. However, we got 3 black squares here, which suggests that the 3 entities that were loaded did not get deleted. All that happened was their textures got undeleted, or got deleted or something, and somehow we are looking at sprites without textures. Do I have any errors in the console? I don't even have any errors in the console, and I don't know what that's about. If I would open the scene again, open scene, test 2D scene. This is the scene view, so it's independent of Plan Editor, and Plan Editor, I can see the scene in my game code. Yeah, so I'm doing a little bit better today. Yesterday my head wasn't really clear. So I wasn't really working very well. So I've had a chance to kind of think about my approach here, and I think I'll probably get some more done today. So for starters, I'm gonna rearrange where we bind the shader, because that's just causing a whole bunch of problems. The principal problem is that my 2D renderer that I am using pretty much just for development purposes, it requires that you bind the shader that you're going to use to draw the sprites before you invoke the API. In practice, that's not how materials are going to work. And in the end, what's going to happen is I'll provide a API for loading and setting up materials, and then your renderer can access those materials when it goes to draw. And if you're making a pipeline that utilizes a renderer in a new way, so for example, if you're using the renderer to draw a shadow map or something that's unrelated to the purpose of a base material, that's when we would use fallback shaders. Let me move my mic a little bit. There we go. So we ran into some problems where I was trying to load a shader file before a game module was loaded. I'm going to completely change that now. I'm going to go back to the 2D renderer, and in the 2D renderer, we will load a basic material and do all that. And I'm just going to temporarily take away my ability to render from the 2D renderer with a different material, because that's not important right now. That's an infrastructure that we're going to need to set up anyway. For now, I just care about getting the scene editor working. So in Renderer 2D, Renderer 2D is initialized when the game project is. So just to review, if we go to testgame.cpp, this is the entry point for my test game project. It's a init call, or game sysinit is where we set up game systems, and this is where I say renderer 2D init, and I pass in 1,000 to say this game will want to support up to 1,000 sprites at once, or I should say 1,000 sprite components. It's a little pedantic at this point, but you can attach 1,000 sprite components to entities in the scene, and we have that limit, so that way we can do a memory pool for that stuff. But inside of the game sysinit, we're going to have it, instead of the scene during on module load, we will have it load the shader and bind it before scene draw. So here we go. Inside here, we've got, I'm just reviewing what we've got. We've got the memory allocation stuff. So sprite components, min, mag filters, modes, and whatever. Those are all vectors. So the first thing we do is we immediately resize them to accommodate the number of sprite components that we want to support. And that's basically effectively making each of these a memory pool, index aligned to the sum index. And then we go to scene manager, register scene draw function. So we register what the code actually renders the scene. And then we register the component type so that way we can serialize and deserialize the sprite components as elements of the scene, and display it in the editor and stuff. And then this stuff here is specifically for rendering. So this utilizes the enterprise excuse me. This uses the enterprise graphics API instead of using OpenGL calls. So basically we just create a index buffer where every single index follows the pattern of clockwise winding around a sprite. Because the index buffer will never change, all we're going to do for the batch renderer is update the vertices, because sprites are always just squares. And then we create a vertex array where we pass in position, UV, and texture ID. So we use the texture ID to decide which sampler to load from. And that helps us batch render because we can use a whole bunch of textures at once if we need to. Cool. And then at this point, I will say load shader file. And then inside of render 2D cleanup, which I don't think I've got yet. Do I not have a cleanup function? I guess not. Well, inside of cleanup, we're going to add that right here. We're going to unload the shader as well. You could argue that it's not strictly speaking important, because when you go to unload your game module, which is when this goes to be called anyway, when you go to unload your game module, that's when the graphic system will do the cleanup of the shader anyway. But I want to just, for the sake of being crystal clear, I do want to have a cleanup method inside of all the systems that will handle cleaning up their own memory, just in case there's a point down the road where I want to be able to load and unload systems without loading or unloading a game module. I don't find that very likely, but you know, better get my ducks in a row. At the very least, this will tell future Michael that I did actually think about this problem about when the shader would be unloaded. Okay, and then right below init, we can do void cleanup. Actually, it'd be void renderer 2D cleanup. And then from here, we would say delete shader, and the name of the shader inside of the simple material.glsl is called simple material. So we use that, and then because this is just a delete call, we pass in the hash instead of passing in the actual string. Cool. So now the renderer is loading and deleting its own shader. Hey, what's up? And now that it's doing that, we can actually do a bind and unbind before scene draw. Are you going to embed a scripting language for game logic? I don't think so at this point. I might change my mind as I get further into that problem. I know that C# is a very popular scripting language for game stuff, but right now I'm envisioning that I would add something called a behavior component, which would be a way for you to basically like create a class that's based off of something called like a behavior component class or something like that, and then you write your scripting stuff in C++, and then it gets attached through use of the vtable. That's probably the one. Like there's very few places in Enterprise where I use virtualization. This would be one. But yeah, I'm not necessarily convinced that it's best to use a scripting language, because you can do it in C++. You just have to come up with a way that makes it elegant for developers. And C# is a great language, but I feel like if you're working on the low level, you should be working without a garbage collector, if you know what I mean. All right. So anyway, we've got the shader being loaded. I can actually drop the EP prefix here because we're inside of the Enterprise namespace. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's whenever people ask me about this stuff, like I give my honest answer, but I'm always a little bit worried that somebody will completely disagree, and then I'll have rubbed them the wrong way, because these topics can be political in programming arenas. There we go. So now I'm able to bind the shader and unbind the shader within the renderer. So we'll pass in simple material like that, and then graphics. I think it's just unbind shader, or do I even need to? Oh, I don't even need to unbind it. I just leave it be. All right, cool. So that's that. That's that. And then cleanup, I need to actually invoke that now. Like that. Bam, bam, bam. All right, good. And now that that's done, I can get rid of this on-module load stuff. Let me find that. What I'm doing right now is I'm just taking care of a little bit of renderer stuff that's necessary to get to work on the scene editor. My focus is not actually going to be on the renderer today. View scene on module load. Yeah, I need to get rid of that. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's good. That's good. And yeah, now I can get rid of the shader stuff from the scene view. Yep, all right. And get rid of that. Save. And get rid of this. And save. That should be it. Just doing a quick double check. Yep. All right. And F7 to build all. Only having to rebuild 23 objects this go around. Oh, actually, no, that would be 13 because it skipped the first 10 for some reason. There we go. And F5. Cool, editor's running. If I was to open up a scene file now, there we go. It's displaying the characters correctly. If I hit play mode, I've got play and editor going. If I was to stop, close the scene, and hit play, yeah. So let's take care of this problem first. This suggests that I'm not cleaning up my scene correctly when I go to unload a scene. What's happened is that even though I clicked close and I don't see the sprites in the left view anymore, that's only because its clear color is black and the clear color is gray inside of the game view. And so we can see that we still have 3 squares. They're just black and you don't see the sprites on them. I am a little bit surprised that I'm not getting an error message or a warning inside of the console for this, because you would think that if you try to render with a texture that's no longer around, that I would have a error detection scheme for that, but I guess I don't. So let's go to Renderer 2D. I'm going to hop into its scene draw and into the spot where we draw the sprite components and set a breakpoint. All right, and let's see what we've got. I'm checking out the state of the renderer right now. So we still got the pool, 1,000 entities. Where is here we go, sprite component count. So sprite component count is 0 right now. So apparently the renderer 2D is aware that we have deleted the 3 sprites in question. The way that this works is that we have a pool. Basically, we just we allocate all of the sprites that we're going to be using from the get-go, and then we just take an element out of that pool whenever we need a new sprite. So that way we don't have to allocate anything. And so if this is fine, then what's going on with the black squares? How could it be fine? All right, let's keep going through the logic. So we're going through the entire sprite component count. So we've hit begin batch, and now we are going to iterate through all the sprite components, and it just skips, and we go straight to end batch. Let me step inside of that. Okay. So we set vertex data for the quad vertex array. Sprites to push is 0, so we're pushing 0. We're pushing 0 sprites to the vertex. Then I go to draw triangles, quad vertex array, sprites to push times 6, which is 0. And then we disable the batch texture shader option. So what? What in the heck? What is happening? Because there's not anything else that might be rendering those quads. Without the renderer 2D class, there's no triangles, let alone sprites. So I think this is going to be one where we bust out our friend RenderDoc. And for this, for some reason, RenderDoc requires OpenGL to be double buffered if you're going to use it in windowed mode. So let me turn that on. That would be here, editor. We'll set double buffer to 1. Kind of a hacky way to do this, but I'm not quite ready to implement this properly yet. Let's rebuild, and let's open up RenderDoc. I'm going to analyze what's happening on those frames. Are we built? Yes, we are. Let's load up. Oops. Enterprise. Build. Binaries. Debug. Enterprise.exe. And then for the command, or for the working directory, I need that to be the root. And then for the command line arguments, I'll just copy them in from here. Here. Sandbox, and we'll have it open up the project immediately. There we go. How's your day going so far? What's up? Just sort of chilling. Okay, here we go. So the editor is running with RenderDoc now. It says capturing OpenGL. This makes it kind of hard to see the title bar, but that's what we're gonna have to do. All right, so we've loaded up the scene and play an editor as well. Let's go ahead and close the scene. And now we've got the weird thingy happening where we can see the sprites, but not their textures. So let's do F12. Now we've got a capture. And let's take a look at it. All right. So, been sick lately? Oh no. What do you think it is? What do you think you got? Okay, I think this is where we start drawing that. Yeah, here we go. There we go. All right. So let's take a look at what we've got. This is where I've got GL draw elements drawing those three. Hypotension for a couple of days, probably dehydrated and eat too little. Yeah, man. You gotta be careful. Just rest up. Hopefully you'll feel good soon. Alright. So I've identified the location in the frame where we draw those three black sprites. Let's take a look at the calls preceding that. We've got GL vertex attrib pointer. This is probably just telling it where the vertex texture and texture index. Sorry, vertex, UV, and texture index positions are inside of the vertex array. And if we take a look down at the API inspector, it indicates that we're drawing 6,000 triangles. That's wholly unexpected. That's very unexpected. So if I hop into the draw sprite component section, we go to nbatch. This is where we actually make that call. I go to set vertex data, and then I go to draw triangles. And then inside of draw triangles, we have the call to GL draw elements here. And what RenderDoc is telling me is that that's being called with a triangle count of 6,000. That surprises me a lot. So let's set a breakpoint. Are we still running? Yeah, we are. So how come... Oh, because I'm not debugging through... Yeah, let me take care of that. So I'm going to leave that breakpoint there for starters. And then let's quickly confirm. Count is 6,000. Am I always drawing... Have I been drawing the entire buffer the whole time? Because it says 6,000 right off the bat. And... yeah, that would be one element, or one element for every vertex, because there's 6, and we have a buffer of 1,000 sprites. What the fuck? What the heck? Sprites to push is 0. I'm passing in 0 times 6. How on earth is count 6,000? Is bind vertex array for draw changing it? It appears to be. Okay, bind vertex array for draw. What are we doing to count? Array has IBO is equal to IBO handles.count array. I haven't learned graphics library properly, so I want to see how you do stuff, debug design, etc. Sure, yeah. I've got a fair bit of experience now, but all of it basically is with this engine. So I kind of know what's going on here because I wrote this code, but I am still new to graphics programming myself, relatively speaking. But yeah, I'm starting to get into the advanced tools like RenderDoc. It's really handy. This issue seems to be with my code, though, less with the OpenGL code. For some reason or other, when I go to bind vertex array for draw, and this is an internal call where I set up the rendering state to use my vertex array, which is a buffer of vertices and indices. It's setting the count back to 6,000. So this is where it happens, it looks like. Count equals IBO num of indices minus first. And first is set to 0. Okay, yeah, so something's very wrong with this call. I'm going to turn off the other breakpoints. I'm just going to set the breakpoint for bind vertex array for draw. I'll continue. So we've got array 1, count 0, first 0. And I'll step in. Let's take a look at these notes, though, I've left. To do, check the size of the currently bound uniform buffers against their respective blocks in the program. Okay, that's an assertion thing, just to make sure that we're not using a uniform buffer against a program that has a different idea of what that uniform buffer is. Skip everything at the VA. Shader combination hasn't changed. This is specifically an optimization where if I am rendering with the same vertex array and shader combination as last time, then there's no need for me to talk to OpenGL at all. However, that's probably not a very likely scenario, so who knows if I'll actually implement that. Yeah, and so the very first thing that happens is we check to see whether count equals 0. Oh, okay. Oh, now I'm understanding the purpose of this code. The idea is that if you pass in a count of 0, my thinking was that tells me that you want to render everything in the array. Like, you don't care how many elements you've got. And that's actually just not what's happening here. What's happening here is that I happen to have a 0 length render call. So I could make the change in here. I could just get rid of this conditionalizing and then just require that you tell me how many indices you want to render. However, there's going to be situations, especially in 3D, where I'm going to be having like a single vertex array per object. I mean, practically, there's going to be a whole bunch of 3D, like even in 3D, batching is still a huge thing. So there's still going to be a whole bunch of situations where I'll be batching smaller models into single arrays to avoid multiple draw calls. But practically speaking, there will be situations where I will just want to dedicate a vertex array to a single object. So this use case makes sense to me. So I have a couple of ideas. The first would be, if we go to, and let me stop debugging. The first would be, if we go back to Renderer 2D, I would just have a check in here and not call the draw call if sprites to push to 0. That'd be probably the quickest, easiest solution. An alternative would be that I can change the parameter count in first from size t to be an integer type. I use size t because that's the maximum size. That's the unit you normally use for accessing array elements, because it's the address width type. So in this case, on 64-bit computers, this is a 64-bit unsigned integer. Unsigned long, in other words, is what the type def says. I could change that to a signed integer and then make 0 a legitimate value, and then use the flag -1 for drawing everything. I think I prefer the first idea. I think I prefer conditionalizing this call instead of passing in 0 and expecting that to make sense. So let me do that. I'm gonna say if sprites to push, then we will do this. Like that. Use size t max. Yeah, that's another possibility. That's a good point. I would just like say -1 and then have it do the integer wraparound and make the maximum value be. And that's totally possible. However, I think I prefer this approach where I'm only drawing if I have not pushed any sprites into the renderer. So if I start a batch, and then in between start batch and end batch, there aren't any calls to draw a triangle, or draw a quad, sorry, then I will just skip set vertex data and draw triangles, and just move on. I think that makes more sense because it makes clear in the renderer code that we are skipping that case. And then I can just continue to use 0 the way that I have been for indicating that we want to draw the entire vertex array. Yeah, so I think this is probably what I mean. I'm gonna press F7 to build everything. And now, when we go to play in editor, file, open scene, test 2D scene. Oh, that's my breakpoint. I didn't clear my breakpoint. All right, got the scene loaded. I hit play. The game view is running. And I'm just gonna leave the game view running while I close the scene, and voila. Okay, so that's fixed. Perfect, ready to move on. Close out of that, and let's turn off the double buffering. Back to single buffering. All right, and now I'm hoping at least, that this will have resolved a couple of problems that I was seeing before. If I go to open a scene file, I wonder if I can close the project and reopen the project without crashing. Nope, there's still a problem. Let's see what we got. So I've got an assertion failure. I'm asserting that current slot of texture.count at texture exists before we go to bind a texture. So we are in the draw sprites call. So we're doing rendering code right now. We are adding a sprite to the buffer. So this is in between begin batch and end batch. We are calling draw sprite. And sampler slots I equals texture. Is that the next call? No, sorry. Graphics bind texture is the call that we are failing on. So we're calling bind texture on a texture handle of 4, and passing in the texture handle btext textures. And I forget what I does. I is the index into the... Oh, I is the... yeah, alright. I is a texture slot. Index. And the problem is current slot of texture doesn't believe that btext textures exists. So let's find all instances of this handle. Okay, so btext textures is the sampler 2D array that we use in shaders that support batched texturing. All right. So is this a failure then to reload the shader? Let's go back to where we were. I'm taking a look at the console. There were a couple of warnings regarding a failure to read the scale and rotation and position of one of the entities. Probably because I was using play in editor for a frame while the scene hadn't been loaded. And then we go straight into an assertion failure. So my current hunch is that we are trying to render with the null shader, and that the correct shader to use, the simple material shader, got unloaded and has not been reloaded. So let's go to where that occurs. It's going to be renderer 2D. I'm going to set a call, or sorry, set a breakpoint on the call to load shader file and delete shader. And let's see what happens. Pressing F5 again. So here's the call to load shader. If I hit continue, everything is hunky-dory. I go to close the project, delete shaders called on simple material. That's all well and good. Then I hit continue, and we're back up and running. If I go to open testgame.ev proj again, we call load shader, and I hit continue, and nothing happened. Okay. So I guess in order for the issue to trigger, I do have to have a scene loaded at least. So let's try that. I'm going to say file, open scene, content, test 2D scene. All right, so here's the test scene with 3 sprites in it. I will now close the scene, close the project, delete shaders called, I hit continue, and then let's open up the project again. We load the shader. Okay, I think the issue is specifically happening when I go to close the project while the scene is open. Oh, actually that makes sense. I don't think I've handled that condition. Close project, we invoke delete shader, and then we hit continue and nothing happens. If I go to open project, well, we hit the load shader file, and if I continue, we get that insertion again. I think that I might be failing to clean up something from editor play in the regular cleanup function. That's my only presumption. So I can probably skirt this whole problem by enforcing the end of enforcing the closure of a scene file before we close the project. I don't think I've done that yet. It's probably the root of this issue, even though I don't fully understand it. So we're going to go to, that would be scene editor.cpp. Yeah, so we're going to need to do this. We're going to need to execute the delete entities loaded by scene file before we close the project. Okay, so if we have a scene file open, we will close it and then we will clean up. All right, let's give that a shot. Let me clear those breakpoints. Cool. All right, so let's open up a file, open scene, content 2D scene. Yep, and it's all working fine. And then we'll close the project while the scene is open, and then we will open the project again, and then we will open the scene again. Okay, that seems to have fixed it. Cool. So I think we're good on the bug squashing for now. So with that done, I think we're ready to start implementing some controls for the scene view. And this might be a little bit tricky because I have to make some executive decisions on exactly what form that should take. I guess for the moment, I'm going to start with a basic 3D camera. And I kind of like if I open up the game view again, and let's make this bigger. I kind of like the style of clicking and dragging to move the camera. And I want to be able to use the AS and WD keys to move as well. Just thinking about what the navigation inside of the scene view should look like. I will also want to support widgets for controlling the camera, and that would mean changing things like the field of view, or changing to an orthographic perspective, or aligning the camera with an axis. I'm gonna have to do a little bit of brainstorming. So I'm gonna take a quick break. I'm just gonna probably pour myself another cup of coffee. And when we come back, it's gonna be design time, and I don't do that very often on stream. I'm gonna take some time to decide what I want the scene editor camera to look like and how I want it to behave. And then we will start implementing that using IMGUI. All right, I'll be back in like, I don't know, 5-10 minutes probably. We'll see. Alrighty, I'm back. Cool. And where were we? Yes, so we've resolved the last outstanding issues with starting and stopping and closing projects and all that stuff. So now we can reliably open and close scene files and have them display in the editor, whether or not the game view is running. And now we gotta take a look at ways that we can interact with the scene view. So we're gonna start off with a little bit of research. Let me open up Unity and let me open up Unreal, because they are great examples of editor workflows that use a scene view. They have two slightly different approaches, and we're going to explore those real quick. And while I'm talking about them, I'll be mulling over why I might pick one over the other, or if I would even want to do either of them. Yeah, I've got a number of test projects. Let's do this 4.91. Or do I have to pick one or the other? Yeah, I guess I'll just do, I'll do this one. I haven't really got any actual projects here. I was just playing around with some things on some of these. Are you opening? Double click. Okay, it's opening. And while that's going, the Unity is still setting up. All right, we'll give that a minute. I'll move the game view into perspective real quick, because technically speaking, I have a camera control scheme going. It's just that this happens to be game code instead of editor code. All right. Oops, I opened up the project twice. All right. So starting with Unreal, Unreal has a couple of ways to handle movement. So first is that if we click and drag with the left mouse button, we push forward and back. It's a little bit like driving your car. Your camera view remains in the same at the same height and moves forward and backward relative to whatever way the camera's facing. Moving left or right on the mouse pans it around. And then while you're doing this, if you click and drag with the right mouse, you can adjust your height. So it gives you a quick way to kind of navigate around. And from there, you can actually, if you just do the right mouse by itself, you can do a free cam. And then while so doing, you can move around with the ASWD keys. And you have the E and the Q keys on the opposite sides of the W key to move the camera up or down. Now, if you hold down Shift while you are moving, you stop. And I'm not really clear why that is. Normally, like in a lot of places, when you hold down the Shift key, you're going to go faster, not stop. That's kind of how this is, I guess. I don't know. There must be some reason behind it. And this is a pretty good scheme. It's particularly good when you're working with levels where you want to just look down on the world. So this top-down example would be one where this might be particularly useful. However, I do have some gripes with it. Using the right mouse button is intuitive for a 3D space. If you are using a top-down perspective and you want to just like look down at the scene and move through it like you're driving a car, I feel like that doesn't make a lot of sense. So then I think I'm going to shy away from this whole pan and then forward and back mouse motion thing. Let's take a look at how Unity does it. Yep. This is a little simple little thing that I whipped up when I was brushing up on how Unity did things. I was working on a wind system, I believe. It was just playing around with shader graph, and I got the foliage to jiggle around as if there's wind blowing on it. And this is just a simple little 3D thing. So inside of Unity, the first major difference is that the left mouse button is not used for navigation. It is used for mouse picking. And that's maybe a little bit reductive, because in Unreal Engine, you also use the left mouse button for picking. You click on an object and it selects it. However, if you click and drag, you go to navigating. And if you click and drag in Unity, you will get the box select. So you can select anything that's within the bounds of the box. I particularly like that. I think that would be very useful. Regarding the right mouse button, it actually behaves identically to the way the right mouse button works in Unreal, with the sole exception that while you're moving, you can hold down the Shift key and it'll make you go faster. And for some reason, holding down the Shift key is like the brakes in Unreal. Not really clear why they did that. There's not a thing for Unreal has the right and the mouse buttons at the same time to move the camera up and down. Yeah, the UE mouse navigation is kind of weird. Yeah, it is a little bit. At first I thought I liked it, and then I kind of just I don't know. I started out using Unreal Engine, and then I started to play around with Unity, and I think I've come to think that being able to drag a box around things in the scene, I think that's probably because like look at how easy it is for me to like say I want to move this bunch of flowers, right, and then just like select and drag them all at once. Like that's great. That's really powerful. So I don't know. I don't think I exactly want to copy per se how Unity does the movement. For one thing, I don't like the fact that they have a lerp for the start and the stop. I think if we go back to my simple game view, when I let go of the keyboard, it just stops. I don't need it to look cinematic, right? Like I don't need the camera to smoothly interpolate to a stop. It just makes it feel like it's not responsive or less responsive, which is, this is fine because that means it's less work for me. But I think the idea that you would use the left mouse button specifically for picking and only for picking, the right mouse button only for navigating, or I suppose there's context menu stuff. Let me try that out. Do I have a... Okay, there's no context menu items either. Yeah, so right mouse button for navigating, left mouse button for using whatever tool for picking, or for if you have, in this case, they have a pan tool as well. I think that's probably a good way to go. Do they use and the middle mouse button for panning? I think that's a great... You know what? I think I'm just gonna straight up copy this. I don't want to, because I don't like the idea of just like bringing in somebody else's idea and then not iterating on it. Like I want to think through what I'm doing. But I really do dig this arrangement. Each mouse button has its own thing going on. So yeah, I'm gonna use that design scheme for now. So inside of the editor view, going back to the scene, let's start with a 3D camera. And when we hold down the mouse button, we'll do the dragging around. Unity has this thing going on as well, which I think I'm gonna do, where you see that the mouse wraps around the screen while I'm using the camera. And that's an interesting choice, because another way that you can do it, and I think that's how Unreal does it. Like if you take a look at what happens when I do this in the Unreal viewport, the mouse, the cursor gets trapped inside of the camera. You don't see... Hey Devilbox, welcome in. So when I'm clicking and dragging in here, the cursor straight up disappears, and it gets trapped where I clicked, and reappears when I let go of the mouse button at the point that I had selected. I do kind of like that for the right-click view. I think that makes it a lot less likely that I'm going to lose track of the mouse. But on the other hand, I'm not losing track of the mouse in Unity either, because I can still see the cursor as I'm dragging around. I currently don't have an API set up for mouse trapping, so I may have to look into that. But for the moment, I'm just going to completely ignore the position of the cursor. I'll use the mouse delta to control the camera, and then wherever the cursor winds up at the end of that, that's where it'll have to be. Okay, I'm going to write down some of these goals. So, say, enterprise, scene nav, we'll say left mouse button is for picking, click / box drag. We'll say right mouse button is for camera, so ASWD while held. And then, yeah, you know what? I'll say middle mouse button is for panning. This is specifically from a 3D perspective. Things will be a little bit different when we want to work in 2D. I suppose we can think about that right here. I just turned on the 2D mode in Unity. when we use 2D mode in Unity, the right mouse button becomes a panner instead of a camera mover. So now the middle mouse button and the right mouse button effectively do the same thing. I think that makes sense, but I'm not going to bother with a 2D mode or orthographic camera quite yet, even though my focus is going to start on 2D instead of 3D. We'll just come back around to that. But yeah, just so I don't forget, I put it on a little note. And let's go ahead and start implementing that. I'll close out of Unity. No, I'll leave these guys running. There's a chance I'll want to refer back to how they do things as I work. And let me take a sip of this coffee, which should be cool enough by now. It's good. All right. So first things first, let's take a look at the camera. Let me close out of these extra things, and we'll go to the scene view here. So just for the sake of confirming that the scene was loading, I did set up a simple little camera that was just an orthographic camera that was 10 units tall, and it followed the aspect ratio for the width. We can do a little bit better. I'm going to set up some properties that are static that we can refer back to. So we'll do a static, I guess it'll be GLM vec3. And this will be a cam position. We'll also do a static GLM vec3. No, let's do a static float for the aspect ratio. Not the aspect ratio. Getting my terms mixed up. For the field of view. And this is this needs to be initialized. And then we'll also need a rotation. So we'll need a static GLM quat. I think it's for quaternion. Yeah, cam rotation. Hey, Devil Walks. That's going good. How's your day going? I'm actually doing a lot better productivity-wise today than I was in my last stream. Okay, so we got the camera position, its rotation, and we've got the field of view. I'm actually thinking that instead of doing a quaternion for the rotation, I think it would make sense to actually use roll, pitch, and yaw. Actually, I don't even need roll. I'm not even going to be rolling the camera when we're in the scene view. So actually, we can just simplify this and just do static float cam pitch cam yaw. Not too bad. Yesterday was a bit rough. I was learning how to create a window without an IDE in C++, so that was fun. Yeah, that's fun stuff. Were you working on Windows, or were you working on another platform? Windows, yeah. Yeah, it took me a considerably long while to get comfortable with it, because there's just so much boilerplate associated with it, and just like understanding why each part of it is important. It makes you really want to just go back to GLM, right, or GLFW, right? But it is really helpful for understanding how these applications work. So good on you. Do you think you've got it figured out? And I'll set these default initialize these to 0 as well. My knowledge of C++ syntax is also very limited. Yeah. Nowhere close to fully understanding it. Yeah, it'll take a while. It's one of those things, thankfully, though, that you do it once and then you don't have to think about it for the rest of your project for the most part. It's good. Yeah, something that's frustrating for me about the Windows, the Win32 API is that it's actually not a C++ API, it's a C API, and so there's a lot of little things that they do the C way that frustrate me. So you're passing in a lot of pointers to structures that are populated as output parameters. Yeah, And that's like, I mean, like it works, and it's, you know, it's totally a fine way to do it, but it's like there's a lot of ways that you could accidentally mess up. And then the other thing I hate the most is that definitely I hate this more than the first thing I mentioned, is where they have all these types defined for any little thing. They use define on some symbol like handle, like that, like handle or whatever. And they even have like macros that their macros define other defines, and it's just like a mess to try and like to go through the headers and like identify exactly what a handle is. And it's like it's there's so many names for types that aren't actually type safe, and it's because it's using C macros, and it's like, oh yeah, it's a mess. My biggest issue is that I learned to code only with the use of classes thanks to C#, so I'm not used to using ints as functions, and the text disappeared from my screen a little too quickly for me to read it. I'm not used to using ints as functions, and in C++, I guess that's common, lol. Using ints as functions? I guess I don't understand what you mean by that. Because functions are still functions in C++. Int main. Oh, well, that actually that's something that C# would have in common with C++. Not the main function specifically, but int preceding a function call is just the return type of that function call. And in C# you also have return types specified before the function name. Yeah. And there's no free functions in C# either. That's the other thing. What's upset? Anyway, we got a simple camera state up here, pre-initialized. Cam position vec3s are they have a constructor that default initializes to 0, so I don't initialize that here. I don't think. But we'll select cam position, and down here, where we go to push. But like, I'm used to having pass one class to another and be able to use it that way without working around the need of statics for a lot of things. Yeah, I think that like as you pick up more C++, you'll probably start to connect the dots a little bit better with why C# does the things that they do. Like the idea of reference types versus value types is not a C++ thing. But you can understand quite a lot better how the garbage collector works with reference types in C# once you understand like pointers and new and delete and things like that in C++. So you're on a journey that's taking you to a good destination, but the process of learning is painful. I feel you. Okay. So I'm going to change this code up a little bit. The aspect ratio is still going to be defined by the window shape. The position, though, is now no longer fixed. We're going to use cam position, and for the rotation, we will use GLM. I think you can do a quat from roll pitch yaw. Yeah, const Euler angles. Is there one that I don't need to construct a vec3 for? That's gonna make me construct a vec3. I think hiking up Mount Everest would be a bit easier. Yeah, that's a tough one. There's a joke on the internet, or a meme on the internet where somebody posted like an inspirational poster where it's or an inspirational picture where it's like somebody who's like a double amputee and has got like prosthetic limbs on his feet. Climbed Mount Everest, and like the caption said, "This even without legs, this guy climbed Mount Everest. What's your excuse? And the first comment was, my feet would hurt. Something like that. It's just, wow. But yeah, we're going to need to construct a quaternion from the Euler angles, which we're setting the Euler angles directly. Yeah, that's amazing, yeah. There's just a solid reason. We're setting the Euler angles directly as floats, so we'll just construct the vector, or sorry, the vec3 in place for this. So it accepts on the Euler angles. What is it? What order is it expecting? How to learn C++ in 21 days meme. I'm actually not sure which order I need to do on this constructor. Okay, here it is. Build a quaternion from Euler angles pitch, yaw, roll. So pitch, yaw, roll. So we'll do cam pitch, cam yaw, and then for roll we're just doing 0. Okay, and then the projection we're going to use is going to be 3D first. So we'll use GLM perspective. And for this, we pass in the field of view, the aspect ratio, the z near, and the z far. So for this, the field of view is defined as cam FOV. The aspect ratio is pre-calculated as AR up here. Then the near and the far. I'm just gonna pick some arbitrary number real quick. I'll do 0.01 on the near, and I'll do 1,000 on the far. This of course is referring to the near and far clipping planes of a 3D camera. Cool, so that's working. And we've got push camera, draw scene, pop, frame buffer. All right. Where do I pop my camera? Do I pop a camera? I never pop the camera. Oh, let me do that now. Yeah. Here we go. Yeah, so in Enterprise, you're able to, there's a thing called a camera stack, where you can push a camera on the stack, and then when you're rendering that view, you can do like as a pre-pass based on that camera view, you can put another camera view on top and then use the first camera's position as a base for the second, which is specifically how you would do things like portal rendering. But you have to remember to pop the camera, and I hadn't been doing that. Okay, push camera, draw scene, pop camera, clear viewport, set viewport, push frame buffer, pop frame buffer, making sure everything has a corresponding pop call. Okay, I think that's all very well and good. I'm gonna start though by confirming that this actually works. So let me initialize the position to be negative. Sorry, x would be 0. It would be 0, 0. And then on the z, we'll do -5, just so that the sprites are in view. And let's quickly confirm that the camera is still working after I made those changes to code, and then we'll work on implementing the controls. Opening the test2D scene. Well, I don't see anything. The game view sees something. I don't see anything in here though. So what gives? Let's set a breakpoint. Camera position, 0 on the X, 0 on the Y, -5 on the Z. We should be facing with a 0 yaw, we should be facing the positive Z direction. Cam FOV is 0. Oh, I never set the camera FOV. Whoops. Or I initialized it to a stupid value. That's what I did. I'll start with 90, which is a little... No, I'll start with 60. That's a pretty tame field of view. Alright, let's try this again. And I don't need that breakpoint anymore. Here we go. We will open the scene. Alright, we got something. They're all upside down. And they're all really far away. Okay, that's not actually what I was expecting. So what did I mess up? -60 on the field of view. -5 on the camera position, which is, I think, is actually, if we like looking at the if we go to the game view, I think that's the initial. Oh, I'm not playing. I think this is -5 with a field of view of 60. So I should be seeing this, not that. So what's going on there? Game.cpp. Yeah, it doesn't look like I'm doing anything different for the actual viewport stuff. I am rendering to a frame buffer, and then I am getting that color attachment and passing it to IMGUI's get window draw list. Yeah. So let's go to test state.cpp. This is the game code that we're executing in the game view. Push camera perspective. Oh, radians. Oh, I'm an idiot. GLM is expecting radians, and I used degrees. Okay. Yeah, let's fix that. So I'll do up here when we initialize the field of view, I'll do radians 60, and then field of view will just be a radians value. Can I do that? Expected a... Why are you complaining? GLM radians, float, accepts a float, it returns a float, and this is a float. So what's what did I miss? GLM radians 60. IntelliSense is still mad at me. Oh, okay, it's not anymore. Maybe IntelliSense was just being stupid. Yeah. Looks like it was just being slow. It's not as sharp in VS Code as it is in Visual Studio. But I still prefer working in VS Code. At least for this project I do. What do we got? Failed to write permission denied. Oh, I still have the app running. Whoops. Let's rebuild that. Cool. In F5, we will open the scene. And there we go. Okay, cool. So now we got a camera view. These are identical views now because they're both 60 degrees, cameras back -5 units, and so on. Cool. So now we are going to move the camera back to the origin, and actually I can just get rid of that part and just default initialize. And now we can talk about getting input into this scene. Now, off the top of my head, I don't know how to do that because I am very new to IMGUI. This is my first IMGUI based project. So let's take a look at the Dear IMGUI examples, which is just a great way for you to see how a thing works and how you're supposed to use it. Underneath the inputs section, we'll go to dragging. That looks good. Drag me, it says. And as I do, I get a line, and it tells me in that spot right below how far I've drug. Or how far I've dragged. This seems to be alright at first glance, but there is a problem that the mouse is hitting the edge of the screen. So I'll need to look at trapping the mouse. I wonder if I can do that from IamGui. Let's take a look at mouse cursors. This just changes what the cursor is. It might be a little hard to see from Twitch, but as I mouse over these, it changes which cursor I'm displaying. Tabbing, capture override. That's something else. Keyboard, gamepad, navigation, mouse state. It doesn't look like. I don't know. Maybe you are you familiar with Dear IamGui? What's up? Well, if I search Dear IamGui capture mouse, I'm gonna come up with just the whether it's grabbing that input. I guess I'll say mouse trap. Nah. Yeah, this is kind of a learning process for me. I basically want to make it so that I'm getting the delta from Dear IamGui instead of from my game engine. Because there's going to be complications involving getting input from the game engine if I'm not in play mode. So I'm just quickly seeing if anybody else has got. Well, this doesn't seem to be related. Yeah, so I guess what I'm gonna have to do. I've never done mouse trapping. Is use platform API to move the mouse. That's one way to do it. In the case of Windows on my end, what I do in the game code on the game engine side is I will fix the mouse so it no longer moves. So I hide it and I set its position to the same position every frame so it never moves. And then I don't use the cursor at all for determining input. I use the raw input API, which actually tracks the physical mouse delta of the mouse. And that's actually active in this game code if I open up a scene. Here. In this game code, when I go to move the camera around, even though I'm clicking and dragging, it's not actually responding to the movement of the mouse. It's responding to the delta of the mouse. So if I get to the edge of the screen, but I keep pushing left, it'll still push left because it's reading not from the cursor, but from the other. So step one, I guess, is getting the actual delta, the raw delta of the mouse instead of the cursor delta. Then steps 2 and 3 are to hide the visibility of the mouse, or of the cursor, and to stop it from moving. So that way it's not going to be any random location while you're doing that. And I believe that's how Unreal Engine does theirs. So if I let go of the cursor, like if you can see the cursor in the top right corner of this viewport, I click and then I can move around using the mouse delta. I let go and the cursor reappears exactly where it was before. And in reality, all that's happened is that they have cached the previous position of the cursor and then restored it using the Win32 API. And they do that every frame while you're clicking and dragging, because it's even the editor runs on a game loop. In the case of Unity, and we talked about this a little bit ago, in the case of Unity, you have this wraparound thing going on, where you can. I think it is still using the raw input API for capturing the mouse delta. At least I'm pretty sure. It's possible that they're using the position of the arrow. But they do this thing where they don't hide the cursor and they just like let it drag around the window and wrap around. And I'm not sure that I like that, but that's how they do it. In my situation, what I really want to do is I want to implement all the controls for the scene view, not this view, but this view. I want to implement those controls using Dear IamGui if I can. Just so that way there's a separation of... I don't really want to be using my input API for things that are not gameplay, because that kind of gets to be a mess to untangle. Because even when I'm not in Play and Editor, like there's going to be game code running. Like when we have, and I haven't implemented the hierarchy yet, but when we have custom game components going, those will be running in custom game systems that themselves may be using the engine's input API. And I think it would just confuse things if I also insert one from the editor. But it's kind of looking like IamGui doesn't have... oh, here it is. Hang on. Mouse delta. Okay, so it does have a mouse delta. So I could use that. But does it have a way to trap the mouse cursor? Let me Google that instead. How about just hiding the mouse cursor? Oh, here we go. Mouse position, fix, mouse hiding. I've added a note into your IamGui implementation glut.cpp that this is not implemented. I guess this has to do with the glut library. Glut is, I think that's a OpenGL windowing library, if I'm remembering correctly, which does more things than GLFW. Okay, I'm going to quickly search the code base to see how this mouse delta is calculated. If the mouse delta is from raw input, then I'll be satisfied to use it. And then I'll hold off on... Yeah, actually, it doesn't seem to be going negative as I drag left on the X. It seems to be fixed on the 0. Oh, so I don't even need to search the code base to understand that that's not what I want. Oh, that's really annoying. It's really looking like I'm going to have to use my own API for this. And I don't want to re-implement my own API either. So I guess what I'm going to need to do is I'm going to need to just bite the bullet and then figure out how the editor can work with the enterprise input API without fucking things up for the game code. All right, let's do that. All right, back to the code. So what this means is that inside of the scene view, I'm going to need to ask EP input for help, which means I've got to include enterprise/input.h. There we go. And then we would call EP input, and then we would say load context file, and I would need to specify a path. Now I do have virtual file paths set up for the engine, I believe. I just don't use them very often. Let's look for vpath or virtual file.cpp vpath virtual path. There it is, virtual path to native. Yeah, so I do have the EC and the ED virtual drives for my virtual path system, so I can pull something out of the editor content folder if I wanted to. So let's do that. We'll do a load context file, and then this takes a path and a fallback path. So what this allows me to do is I can specify, first I'll use the editor data folder, and I'll do scene view input.ini, and then I can do EC for the content path and do scene view input.ini as the fallback. And the way that this works is that first it'll check the editor's persistent data folder for scene view input.ini, but if it doesn't exist yet, because this is the first run of the editor, it will copy out the template that's in the content folder. So let's set up that. Let's create a new file. It's scene view input.ini. So we'll say save as editor content scene view input dot fuck it, I'll just type it in .ini. There we go. And as a template, I'm going to refer back to the test input ini. This guy. This is the input bindings I've been using for controlling the camera in the other view. So I'm going to just copy it out, paste it, make some changes. So the way that input context definitions work in my engine is that you make an ini file, you have a section header that begins with input dot, and that puts it inside of a section group called input. And the engine will understand that any group that's, or any header that's part of the input dot group will be the name of an input context. So in this case, I would say scene view input as the context name. But input's a little redundant. I'll just say input.sceneview, and that'll be enough. So I don't need these input action for exit and toggle, because I'm not going to be pressing escape to exit the scene view. It's not a game. It's just the scene view. We will use move X, move Y, and move Z for ASWD, and then the Q and the E keys. These are already set up with scales correctly. This is not, by the way, if you're learning about ini files, this is not a standard ini thing. This is an extension that I've used, or that I've made. Basically, you can. Some systems that use ini will allow you to do multiple keys. Some don't. Enterprise allows it, and then Enterprise also allows this, where you can make a value itself a dictionary, where you have key value pairs inside of parentheses. So for every one of these, I add an access mapping with these parameters. That's how that works. So that's all fine and good. There's an equivalent. I I'm just gonna get rid of the gamepad mappings in this case. I know some folks like to use their gamepads for editor stuff in their engines. I don't. Like Dear I Am GUI itself has a whole thing where you can control the window using a gamepad, and I don't understand why they do that. But in this case, we're only going to be using keyboard and mouse. So we've got the move for the camera. We've got the speed boost, which is just when you hold down the left shift, it'll increase to 1, and then you can multiply that plus 1 times whatever to be your camera move speed. Level design with gamepad. Yeah, I mean people do that in their own homebrew engines. I'm actually gonna test it real quick. I don't think that Unreal or Unity does this. That would be a bit much for me. Oh, it does. So I just plugged in my Xbox gamepad, and the scene view in Unreal is working. And if you hold down the bumpers, I guess it changes the field of view. The triggers makes you go up and down. And why would you do that? What's the value here? Am I just not hip? Am I not into the things that young game developers are into? Yeah, I don't know what that's about. Does Unity do it? Now I gotta know. Does Unity do it? Let me focus the view. Unity does not do it. That is just an Unreal thing. Though, I suppose it's not playing, and this loop doesn't actually run until you play. So I'm wondering if I hit play, and then I go back to the scene view, whether it'll take my gamepad input. No, it doesn't. Oh, but this makes sense. It is still controlling the game. See, this is what I would expect. I wonder if Unreal does this. Oh, right. Unreal kind of skirts the problem because they only have the main view. They don't have the separate scene and game views. Yeah. So. Yeah. All right. That's interesting. But yeah, I guess Unreal is into that. I'm not into that. I don't know. Maybe if this engine takes off as a popular solution and people beg me for it, I'll add it. But that's probably never going to happen. Anyway, the look control. In the case of the test game code, I had a separate look X and look Y for the mouse than I had for the gamepad because they're fundamentally different controls. But in this case, I'm only using the mouse, so I can just get rid of that whole _ mouse thing. Yeah, I will do enable look mouse for engaging the camera. So what this is about is that if I'm clicking and holding a mouse button, I want that to indicate that we're going to be moving the camera. So literally what I do is I just take and make it an axis. So whether I'm holding down a mouse button, and then in this case I'm going to change this to mouse button 2 because that's the right click. I think it's 1, 2, and then the middle is 3, and then 4 and 5 are forward and backward. I forget the order on that. So when I hold down the right mouse button, the value of this axis will be 1. When I let go, it's going to be 0. I just multiply that value, that axis, by the look and move controls. And that way I don't have to do any branching. Axis mapping, speed boost. Yeah, okay. And we're using mouse delta X and mouse delta Y. And I set the scale to be really low here. I'll leave it for the moment. Cool, so now we've got a scene view input file. And this is saved inside of the content folder, so the first time we run this code, it should be taking and copying this into the data folder, and I have that redirected so that I can analyze what goes in and out of the persistent data folder in a sandboxed environment. Cool. All right, so we got input load context file. In cleanup, I should invoke here. I should invoke EP input unload context file and use the hash name. I forgot the name of the file already, and it's been just 10 seconds. Yeah, scene view input.ini. But I do have to specify ED as the drive for unloading. Perfect. Is this actually called anywhere? So when this view gets cleaned up, it gets invoked. Yeah, so we might have a problem here because this call doesn't actually get invoked when we go to unload the game project. So if we were to load the editor, it would set up the context file, and then when we go to close the game project, the engine runtime is dumped and reloaded, so it would discard all registered input contexts. And then this is never invoked to unload. So actually, this might not be a problem. The cleanup will happen regardless. But what would be a problem is if we never reinitialize the scene view. Okay, yeah, it looks like we do. Okay, that's good. So whenever we open up a game module, or whenever we close a game module, we call init. That's good. Okay, so I think we're all set. Now we just need to take advantage of the context. So this is all access mappings. I don't need to register any callbacks for this input. I just need to pull the input as I need. So we're gonna head back to down here. I'm gonna go ahead and use this. I'm gonna go ahead and get the input during the draw call. There's no reason for me to separate into an update if all I'm doing is controlling the camera. And I will say right here, before we go to push the camera, we will calculate the new cam position. So cam position, I'll say cam position plus equals EP input, get axis, and we're going to be passing in the context name, which is scene view. And then we are passing in the... Oh no, sorry, it's I get the... It shows you how little I actually use this API because I'm not designing games yet. I actually need to get and store the context handle for the input context. Oh, actually I have to create the okay, now I'm remembering. Now it's all starting to click. So loading the context file loads the definition of a input scene view input context. But the way that that the context stack works is that you can supplant any context by loading another one. So I actually do have to instantiate it on the stack. So we'll say EP input bind context, and we pass in the hash name of the context, which in this case is scene view. And then we pass in the stream ID for which player it's going to be. And in this case, it's going to be, I believe it's just 1. I think 0 isn't null. So this is the equivalent of assigning the input to player 1. We'll set the blocking level to... We'll leave the blocking level as it is. There's not... I can't think of any reason why we would need to block. But you know what? Fuck it. I'll do a blocking level. So that's 0 is no blocking, 1 is blocking only the bound controls, 2 is block all input. I will engage a block so that if there is a context listening below the scene view context, that we will for sure beat them and prevent them from operating. And then we need to pick a context layer. I think the music just looped. It did. This is good music and all. I'm gonna change it though. I think I'm gonna have to actually spend money on a service that lets me listen to whatever I want without getting copyright struck. Let's do... Let's do some Celeste. Bangin' soundtrack from a bangin' game. So the idea behind layers is that you can specify which layer, which priority your code has. So if you are if you have like a stack of game states, for example, it's not always enough just to push a input context on top of the stack, because sometimes you want to insert your input context in between the input contexts of 2 other states. So we have a system where we can specify an ID of a layer, and then it'll go on top of that layer's stack, if that makes sense. Okay, so actually it looks like this is a hard-coded value. So we have a max input context layers of 10. Now, why this is important is because if you have the game playing and it goes to push a context on top of its stack, I need the scene views context to always be on top of that. So I kind of need, what I need is a dedicated layer for the game input context, or for the editor's input context. So that way, there's like 10 layers that you can use for your game code, but there's an 11th secret context layer that is only available to the editor, and that you can't use yourself in your game code. So how should I manage that? Well, the first thing I should do is I should add +1 to the max for the context stack. Why does this give me an error? All I did was declare this, or change the declaration of the size. Do I have to specify the size in the declaration as well? That's interesting. I don't remember why I have to do that, but I guess I do. Anyway, Like if I do it in the header, you would think that I would not have to do it here. Maybe I don't. I don't know. I'll come back to that. So for starters, we're going to keep using max input context layers as a constant representing how many context stacks are available to a game developer. And I think 10 is more than enough, really, for any game. But then we'll add an additional one, an 11th one, that's going to be used specifically by the editor. So the next thing to do is to place that restriction on the context stack to only allow access to the 11th layer from the editor. Oh, and you know what? Shame on me. Because it looks like I totally allowed somebody to put in a layer number that was less than, or that was greater than the max. So I'll need to do an EP assert here. And a regular assert will be fine. I don't need to do a slow assertion because binding contexts is not a thing that you'll do every frame. And we just need to ensure that layer is less than max input context layers plus 1. And I suppose what I can do, what I can also do is I can say if def ep build dynamic. So if we're in a dynamic build, in other words, if we're in one that might be running in the editor, then we have this max, and if we aren't, then we have this max. Okay. And are there any other uses for the layer? Like, do I pass it in using any other function? When we go to clear the context stack during cleanup, we go through every one except for the last one. So I'll say, I'll do another if def ep build dynamic. And then we'll do context stack at max input context layers dot clear to get that last element cleared out. And it looks like when we go to process the input, I'll also need to make a modification to have this +1. It's starting to get a little out of hand how many places I'm going to have to change to accommodate this new max. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to undo this code that I just typed. I'm going to approach this from a slightly different way. I will leave this assertion in place because it's important. But I'm going to be using max context layers as the actual cap, and I will just increase the size of it by 1 when we are doing the editor. This isn't public, is it? Static const expression. Oh, it is public. Okay. Yeah, there's no really great solution here. I guess I'll go back to plan A. Eventually, max input context layers is probably going to be something that you set inside your project properties anyway, so it won't be a constant expression. So I'm gonna have to, if that's the way what I do, I'm gonna have to come back here and redo all the code anyway. So I guess, yeah, we'll just do what we were doing before. There's a couple of things, two things left on this. The first is that I'm going to need to ensure that we are only executing from editor code when we go to bind to max input context layers +1. That's actually not a straightforward one to do. Because I have the ability to check whether the editor is the active executable, but I don't have a way, and I'm not tracking the state of whether the code is being executed from the editor or not. I feel like it would be a waste for me to add it here. So what I think I'll do instead is I'll just let the maximum be +1 in editor in dynamic builds, and then just sort of disallow the exceeding the max in standalone builds, and that'll be the catch. Because if somebody accidentally uses more than the max and then they try to build their shipping game, then they'll get a warning saying that that's the problem, and they can just easily go and change the max in their game later. I think that'll be fine. I think that's how I'll do it. So I'll define two separate assertions for this. I'll do if-def ep build dynamic. If we're in a dynamic build, we will do +1. If we are not, then we will do just the regular max. Okay, and now we have to do conditional compilation for the looping sections as well. Down here. So on this one, we were doing for int I = 0, I is less than max context layers, and then we do all this for every context layer. I will simply I could do an if-def on the for loop, but I think that's probably a little bit messy, so I'm just going to go ahead and do a little bit of code duplication. Because it's easier that way. Okay, and then here, instead of going into context stack I.begin, we will be doing well, actually, we will do a context stack I.begin, but instead of passing in I, we will simply pass in max input context layers. Cool. And then we'll do the same thing for this guy. Now that's weird. Oh, this entire function is within... So this is the editor play cleanup function. So actually, I don't need to conditionalize this. This is always going to only execute in the editor or the dynamic versions. So I can just do +1 on that loop. All right, I think that's it. Chasing down all of the places where I have to make this change. So now I've got a extra layer that I can use specifically for editor input. Let's head back to this guy. And now we could just use, I believe it's EP input, max input context layers +1. Cool. So it was a lot of time getting here, but essentially what we've got going is we've got a input context file loaded from the scene view input. We bind it and put it on the stack. We bind it to player 1. We set a blocking level of 2, meaning that while this context is active, no other contexts are allowed to operate. And then we assign it to the topmost stack. Now we just need to hold on to the handle. So let me get a handle in the global state. So we'll do a static EP input context handle input context and assign the context that we've bound to it, and then down here where we were going to do get axis, we can pass in that handle to that context and finally pass in the axis that we care about. In this case, we're going to be looking for movex. And we should be able to just do camPosition.x plus equals the movex. And we'll do the same thing for move y and move z. Presumably. All right, and actually it's not just this, it's also by times move speed. So yeah, so on each of these I would do times EP input get axis for the input context, and then pass in what's the enable look mouse. Let's change that to enable camera, like that. Cool. A little bit wordy, but basically we're taking and we're incrementing each dimension of the camera position by the move X, Y, or Z control times enable camera, which means that if we're not holding down the right mouse button, that these will evaluate to 0. And then we won't have any motion at all. I'll hold off on speed boost for the moment. Let's confirm that this actually works before I move on. I'm pressing F7 to build all. I wonder what else you can do inside of the Unreal Editor with a gamepad besides moving the camera around. Just pressing buttons, I didn't seem to have any... let me try that out while we're waiting for the thing to build. Yeah, it doesn't seem like any of the buttons do anything besides move the camera, so I guess they don't really use it for editing, they just use it for moving through the viewport. Just quickly gonna check my CPU temperatures. Yeah, okay, it's doing all right. This is a pretty sizable rebuild because the the input system header is used in a lot of places. Okay, there we go. We're back, and we have an assertion already. What's this? Layers less than... Oh, I should say layers less than or equal to on these assertions. So let's fix that. I wish I understood why it hung before builds so often. Like just now, it was like 11 seconds before we started compiling input object or input.cpp.object. I don't know. Anyway, here we are. We're back again. Let's open a scene, test2d scene, and I'm going to click and hold the right mouse button and use the S key to move back. I'm not seeing anything though. I'm not seeing anything happen. Which is interesting. The game context is able to run, but not the scene view. Oh, that's weird. So when normally when you lose focus from the game view, it stops processing the context. But inside of the scene view, I have it in focus, and oh, that's weird. It looked like the keyboard was working for a little bit inside. Oh, that's strange. I'm getting some unexpected behavior. So what's happening is that the controls work just like normal on this side. When I lose focus, they stop working like normal. But when I change focus from the game view to the scene view, first the keyboard input's not working. But if I hold down the right mouse button, or if I click it, oh, it's not doing it now. That's weird. I'm not really clear on why that was the case, but I was focusing the scene view and the input was still working in the game view. I don't know why that was. Oh, you know what? It wasn't changing focus. When you right click inside of the scene view, it doesn't actually change focus to the scene view. That's interesting. We'll have to implement that before I forget. So yeah, the camera appears to be not working in there. I click stop play, and now I've got an assertion failure as well. So we've broken something. Input get axis. Context contains no input axes. And this is occurring from the code where I'm trying to get input axes for the scene view. Okay, so we've got some problems. When I click stop on the play in editor, it cleared out my input context. Okay. Yeah, something's not working in the right order. And this, by the way, this trouble that I'm running into is explicitly why I wanted to use IMGUI for this. So that way I didn't have to worry about coexisting with game code. I'm going to set a breakpoint on the point where we load the context file. And I'll set a breakpoint on the input system when we go to clean up down here. Oh, I get it. Okay, I think I know what is wrong here, and this makes it actually a simple fix. So what I was doing was after I added the additional context layer to have an additional layer for input just for the editor. Inside of editor play cleanup, I was clearing out the contents of that last context layer. If I don't do that, and I only do contexts 0 through 9, the first 10 contexts, then I can actually leave the contexts from the editor active when Play in Editor finishes. Okay, that's good. In the case of cleaning up the rest of the input system, I wonder if I could just... Yeah, I should flush the whole thing when it comes to unloading the project, and then let the initialization call from the scene view reload the context. Okay, I think this is going to work. At least it's not going to crash, if not work correctly. Okay, open... Wait, we've already got the project open. Open scene. Test 2D scene. Alright, so I got this view in focus. Right click and move. Yeah, nothing's happening. The game view works just fine, just not the scene view. Which is interesting. Clicking stop gives me the same error. So I didn't even fix the problem. How did that work? I'm going to go into the stop call. So the editor play cleanup, which is invoked whenever we stop editor and play. I'm going to set a breakpoint and just walk through it. So let's open up a scene. I guess it doesn't actually matter whether we have a scene open. This code should execute the same way either way. I'll hit play. We got play in editor going over here. Let's stop. And then let's walk through what we're dealing with. So the first thing we're dealing with is we're clearing the stream bindings. And then we're rebinding the keyboard and mouse to stream ID 1. That's all well and good, because I haven't rebound the stream from player 1. We're going through every layer except for the 11th, and we are clearing. We're marking the context to be deleted. And the way that works is that we mark it to be deleted, and then we actually delete it on the next attempt to update. This was required because if you try to, if you have a context that's inside of a game state and you try to delete the context from a callback from the input system, then it'll be deleting the context while it's operating on the context, and that causes a crash. So we mark it to be deleted and then we delete it later. It looks like we're clearing the layer of context structure, which might matter if we look up the layer for a particular context. We won't know we won't have the layer of the we won't have the 11th layer to look up from. So that could be a problem. We then clear the access values for every layer, it looks like. I think this is probably where the issue is starting. Yeah, so I'm clearing out a map from... Okay, I think this is where the problem is coming from. This state, there's the context stack, which I have already prevented deletion of the editor-only layer. It has a couple of additional maps associated with the context handle that I am clearing. So we try to look up the access values associated with the context, or we try to look up the layer of the context. I am deleting the data associated with the context on the 11th layer. So I need to change that. And I think this is the only state where I need to deal with it. So let's head back to where we were. So I'm going to have to handle this a little bit differently. Instead of calling clear on these structures, I'm going to need to eliminate specifically the values for each individual context that we are clearing. So here where we say c dot to be deleted equals true, I will also say layer of context dot erase c. So we're right. Is that right? Layer of context is a map of context handles. C is the context itself, not the context handle. So I believe the handle is actually just the address of the context. Let me double check that. Yeah, typedef void pointer. So to get the handle of the context, actually just get the address of it. So we will do layer of context.erase. We'll erase the key for this specific context. We'll do the same thing for these others. So instead of .clear, we'll call .erase, and we'll erase on the address of C. Okay. And then at this point, we unload all the definitions that were loaded from Play in Editor, which wouldn't affect the scene view or any of the editor stuff. Yeah, I think that's good. I think that works. There's a potential gotcha going on here, though. In that I'll need to worry about which input stream I'm using for the editor controls, because the input stream for keyboard and mouse might be taken over by the game input. I'll put that on the back burner, but let's at least confirm that this stops the crashing. All right, here we go. Let's open up a scene. Open up this one. We'll hit play, confirm that it's playing, and then stop. And there's no crashing. That's good. So I think that was the issue that we were dealing with Play in Editor. However, we still got the problem that we can't control the scene view. So what am I missing here? There's got to be some reason why the input's not handling in here. Oh, I know what it is. I went through this on the game view a couple of streams back, like 2 weeks ago or something, on Game.cpp. The problem is that I need to tell IamGUI to pass the input events through to the game layer. Yeah, here we go. So there's the edge-to-edge content area stuff. And then we have to invoke, if IamGUI is window focused, then we'll say capture mouse from app false. And that makes it so that the mouse input is allowed to be processed by the engine. Yeah, I guess that's how I'm gonna have to do it. I really didn't want to do it this way, but okay, so I'm just going to copy out this code. There's a bunch of stuff in here as well about making sure that the window is resizable, even though we're passing the input onto the engine side. So I'm going to copy this out, go back to scene.cpp, and right above the viewport resizing code, I will paste this. Okay. Let's try that. All right. And we'll open up a scene, test2d scene.yaml, play. And now if I hold down the right mouse button and press the S key, still nothing. Oh, but interestingly, the game view is no longer accepting my input. I think this is occurring because the context that we have operating is at a higher level and we told it to block all input. So that's my bad, that's on me. I'll need to find a way for the scene. Yeah, I initialized it to 0 after. So what should be happening right now is that it starts at 0 and the sprites are not visible because they are closer to the, well, they're in line with the origin of the camera, and so they are behind the near clipping plane. So if I just wanted to make them visible, I could just set to -5 on the cam position. And I might as well do that so that it's less confusing what I'm doing. And -5 on the Z. But what should be happening is while I'm holding down the right mouse button, I should be able to press the S key and then back up and then see the sprites, and that's not happening. So let's open up the scene with that little change. We can see a link here in this view. I should be able to hold down the right mouse button and then ASWD my way around, and that's not working. The game view is also now not receiving input because I'm blocking it. And I'm gonna need to find a way around this because I need this input to always work. Oh, I have a simple solution to that, actually, now that I'm thinking about it. Let me implement that now. This is beside the point because it's not. This is not related to the problem that I'm dealing with. This just has to do with input blocking. Here, because I have punched in the context into the topmost layer, I know that this will always be executed. So I can actually just let the input pass through from here. And the input for the game layer is actually only going to be executed when the game view is in focus anyway. So I should be able to just have these two input contexts coexist. So let me do that now. Open up the test scene, hit play in editor. Okay, play in editor is not working. Why is that? And of course, neither is scene. Alright, so I'm still missing something. Let me review the code I just copied and pasted in to make sure that it's doing what I think it's doing. We're calling IamGUI is window focused with no flags. If it is focused, then we will say capture mouse is false, so that way the engine has it. Oh, this code isn't being executed before the engine. I'm realizing right now. So, thinking about the chain of events, if we go to the runtime, the editor runtime, this is what happens in the main loop every loop. We start the frame, we draw the scene editor, then we run the game, and then we end the frame. So this engine run does a whole lot of heavy lifting. This is where the game loop actually executes. Actually, that's probably the colon run, right? I guess not. Or that would be EP runtime run. Would be a better way to do that. Yeah. Actually, no, that works out fine. So in the scene editor view, we will mark the window as pass-through if it's focused. And then EP runtime run invokes, and this is where the engine's input system updates. So it actually will update the context information. That information will be available on the following frame. So the scene editor will be one frame behind, technically speaking, with its input, which I'm gonna have to live with for now. But it'll still work. Yeah, at some point I should be setting the capture keyboard and capture mouse back to their previous values. Maybe that's what I'm forgetting. Let's go back to game.cpp. I guess not. Yeah, this is a confusing one. Yeah, all of this trouble just because I can't do raw mouse deltas in IMGUI. And because I don't want to write a second input API. I'm going to poke through the IMGUI code real quick. So if we go to IMGUI implementation for Win32, let's take a look at the window procedure message for IMGUI. The way that IMGUI works is that inside of your base window procedure, you basically pass all of its parameters to the IMGUI window procedure. And then if it deigns to pass to you the events, you can handle the events that it gives you. But it's in full control. Here we go, WinProc handler. Well, this is for the platform window, so this is for the undocked windows. There's a second procedure for the here. Yeah, so this is the procedure for the main window. It handles mouse move events, mouse leave events, mouse button down and mouse button up, mouse wheel events, key down, key up, focus, character messages, set cursor. Oh, so it does have a set cursor. That's interesting. I might want to circle back to that. But I do not see a WM input message. So this tells me that all of its delta is calculated from the cursor. So when the main window gets a mouse move event, it will identify the new mouse position and then subtract the old mouse position from it to get the delta from the previous frame. Which can work. But it's not actually the raw mouse. However, I want to know with the set cursor event. Let me double check what the set cursor event does. Sent to a window if the mouse causes the cursor to move within a window and mouse input is not captured. Okay, that doesn't do what I thought it did. I was thinking that this would be like a response to telling the cursor to move to a certain place. All right, so I'm still not able to use, even in principle, IMGUI to handle the mouse deltas. I was just gut checking myself because I've already spent so much time on this and I'm getting frustrated and wanted to see if I can go back to plan A, which was have dir IMGUI do everything. All right, so I'm gonna set a breakpoint here. So I'll start up the editor, load a scene, and then I'll set a breakpoint to see the state of this code. Okay, so we got the scene loaded, and then let's set a breakpoint here. This is where we are dealing with the scene view. We're rendering the scene view here. So we know that the content area code works all correct because we've been drawing this whole time. into the window successfully. Then we have the is window focused. In this case, it's not. Oh, hang on. I don't need this code. What this is about is it's about telling the engine to discard any input captures that have occurred up until this point. And the point of that is because if you lose focus on the game view, it might still think you're holding down a key, for example. And this actually, that mechanism, now that I'm thinking about it, it actually throws a considerable wrinkle into this plan. Because the whole point of this mechanism is that we're dumping all the raw input messages when we leave the game view. And so if I'm in the scene editor, the game view is out of focus for sure. And we're going to be having it drop all of the raw input on that frame. So whenever I'm in the scene view, and this is actually probably the entire problem, when I'm in the scene view, the game view is not in focus. Or vice versa, if I'm in the game view and the scene view is not in focus, we are dumping all of the raw input and we can't respond to it. So that's a problem. Let me start by testing my assumption. I'm going to comment out this section in the scene view and go into the game view and do the same thing. Maybe this. So this is getting rid of the protection against hanging keys. Gonna rebuild, and if this assumption is correct, I should at the very least be able to move the game view camera. We'll open test scene. Okay. Well, the scene camera is still not working, but if I hit play, this view is not really working. The camera is not really following my mouse movements, but the ASWD keys do. In the scene view, I still have nothing. The game view is got keyboard and mouse, and that's it. And like for the first second or so after I drag my mouse, it moves the camera, which is weird. That's a weird behavior. I for sure don't understand why that's the case. Okay. Stop playing editor. Oh, and you know what? Oh, this mechanism was cursed to begin with. Let's go over the epiphany I just had and confirm that it's actually the case. But here's what I think is going on. If we go to game if we go to runtime.cpp in the editor, every frame we start a frame, we go to scene editor draw, and then we go to EP runtime run. Inside of the runtime run, this is where we actually do the updating of the game code. We do time update, input update, infixed update. Oh no, okay, this is not what I expected. What I was thinking was that if plan editor was not active, that the input system would not update, because the game's not running. But that doesn't appear to be the case. It does appear that when we're doing the running, we will do input update every frame still, but we will skip scene manager and state manager updates, and that's it. Okay, never mind. That wasn't the problem. So what is what is wrong? I don't understand. Open the scene again. So this should be active. Let me set a breakpoint at the point in the scene view where we should be responding to input. Scene.cpp. Set a breakpoint here. And we'll go through this line by line. So we're setting capture mouse from app to false, so that means that the game code is allowed to operate this frame. Or the engine code, not the game code. Then we set up a invisible button. Oh, hang on. Yep, this is a problem. So there's an invisible button over the game view area because I need that to identify when you're inside of the content view versus clicking and dragging on the borders. I gave it a name, and that name, I didn't change it when I copied the code into scene.cpp. And this name it has to be a unique identifier used nowhere else in IMGUI. Otherwise, it gets confused, and I think that might be part of what's happening. IMGUI invisible button, scene view content area button. Okay, and if that button is active, meaning you're clicking and dragging within it, then we have to manually enable keyboard capture, because otherwise it'll ignore the keyboard while you're clicking and dragging. And then the rest is like normal. Okay, hopefully that's it. Hopefully the issue is that there was a conflict between the invisible buttons over the viewports. Get rid of that breakpoint. Open scene, test 2D scene, play. Nope, we still have a problem. And the scene view still doesn't work. That's frustrating. How long have I been at this? I've been at this for 3 hours. I think I may need to stop the stream. Keyboard input is still working correctly. And it's not operating on the game view when it's out of focus, which is good. Let's set that breakpoint again and continue to step through. Actually, let me do that again because the scene view wasn't in focus. Here we go. Alright, IMGUI is window focused, should be true, so we'll say that we're not going to capture the mouse so that way the engine can handle it this frame. And then we go straight to resizing the frame buffer. I'm stepping into the get access calls. Input get access return 0. Okay, that was for the move Y. I think that these values are not around when we get to the to executing this code. So let's take a look at the run loop again. So we start the frame, which means that IMGUI is active. We then call the scene draw code, which is where we pull the input from. We pull the input from the input system within this code. And then we go EP runtime run. And it is during update that we clear the buffers. We go, we do memset on kbm buffer.axes block status. We set them all to 0. So actually, these are just for the block flags. We accumulate raw mouse deltas because you can get multiple mouse move messages in a single frame, so we had to sum them. We reset the active context axes. We then get raw input. And in the case of Windows, we only use this call to get the raw input from the Xbox controllers, because the rest comes in through Windows messages. The thing that I'm not getting is where do we actually flush the buffers? Okay, all right. This is the problem. This is for sure the problem. So what's happening here is that normally at the end of a frame, I will flip the buffers for future input accumulation. So what that means is that over the course, so after Enterprise presents the frame, it will wait until it is time to draw a new frame. That is done through VSync. In the case of the windowed mode in the editor, that's done by DWM sync, I think is what it's called. I forget what or DWM flush. It waits for the desktop Windows manager to say that it's presented a frame. And then when that comes back, the last frame will have just finished presenting and we start over. While we are waiting between the previous frame and the current one, Windows is still sending the application messages, including keyboard and mouse input. And it is in response to those messages that we fill up our input buffers for use during the upcoming frame. Now, in order for that to work, before we go to wait for the next frame to start, we have to flush the contents of the buffer. And then between the start of the start of the wait and the end of the wait, all of that input is stored and then eventually used during input update. And then we flush it out again. All right, so the problem that I'm running into, the reason why input is not generating any response at all inside of the editor is because all of that is occurring at the end of runtime run. So what we've got here is we're starting the IMGUI frame. we're drawing the scene editor, and this is where scene editor pulls for input. And then we do run, and this is where we process the raw input and then dump the raw input. And so that's all within this frame, and we don't come back to scene editor draw until DWM flush is returned. So we've waited for more messages to accrue. So we have all of the raw input messages we need. All the raw input buffers are populated correctly, but because we haven't actually processed it into the form of processed input context yet, all of the input system calls made from the IMGUI layer are always going to be empty. So yeah, that's a big problem, because there's not an easy solution. I could split up the input call, but that's just additional complexity to the EP runtime run. And the whole point of this loop is that I run the game engine exactly as it would run outside of the editor. And this is another reason why, this is yet another reason why I wanted Dear IMGUI to handle this for me. So I think what this means is that I'm going to have to do this the hard way. I'm going to have to, instead of using the enterprise input system for input, I'm going to have to directly set up a new input system for handling things that IMGUI doesn't, and set that up for the editor to use. Dear IMGUI can do a lot on its own. It can give me the mouse deltas. It can give, at least in terms of pixel space, it can give me the mouse states. It can give me keyboard states for any given key press. And I can use all of that to construct a UI outside of just the regular IMGUI menus and stuff. But for those few things that it doesn't do, particularly raw mouse deltas, and trapping the mouse and things like that, I'm going to need to have my own code, and I'll need to make that separate from the engine code. So there's going to be a lot of code duplication that I won't like to do. But yeah, at least now I'm clear on what the problem is, and I'm surprisingly not very angry about it, given that I just spent an hour on this. But yeah, it's that's where we're at. So let me go ahead and trash everything I just did. Let's go back to this guy. I'll leave this content file for the moment. I might need it for something else. It's not hurting anything. But if we go back to the scene code, scene.cpp, this is going to have to be done using something besides input get access. I will still use the graphics API for this. Push camera, draw scene, pop camera, that's all well and good. It's just the input stuff. I will also still need the mouse capture stuff. This. Inside of the scene view. I don't need this though. I don't need to tell the engine to stop responding to input because it's not processing any input at this point. But yeah, this is still gonna matter because when I go to handle the raw input messages, I need those to be marked as not captured by IMGUI. So this code needs to remain. But yeah, other than that, we're a-okay, I think. Let me build this, confirm I didn't just break something by deleting some code. And then I need to identify and confirm the reason for Plane Editor's weirdness. Open a scene, test 2D scene, play. Okay, and suddenly the mouse input is working correctly again. So, yay. And then I need to return the input dump code from before. All right. So I think that does it for me today. I did get, you know, a good chunk of work done. There was in particular some bugs at the beginning of the stream that are no longer available, no longer issues. We can seamlessly open up scene files and not have an issue. And we did decouple the camera position. We set up the camera position so that we just need to get the input mapped to it, and then the camera will follow. Yeah, that leaves more work for tomorrow. I don't think I'm going to work on this anymore tonight. It is possible I'll pop on to play some games later. I don't usually do that. Don't usually do game streaming, but I'll try it out. Yeah, thanks, what's up. Being told I've done a good job is actually a big confidence boost. Doesn't matter who says it. If it's a stranger on the internet telling me good job, I feel a little bit better about myself. So thank you. But yeah, I mean, this is, you know, still a good thing we got going on, right? I mean, just getting to this point, you know, having a game system like work independently of. Oh, that was weird. Did you see that? Did I? What just happened there? I don't know how to write an input system. This is a good learning experience for me. Yeah, I didn't until I started to do this. That was quite the journey for me. But I just want to quickly. I think I just encountered a bug that was unexpected. So, okay, I didn't do it that time. What had happened was that somehow I got the game view tabbed up in the same window as the scene view, and then when I switched to the game view, it was black for no reason. You know what I think it was? I think it was capturing my mouse input when I was clicking and dragging. Oh, let's try that out. Maybe that's a thing. We got the scene view. Ah, okay. There's an issue. So I'm able to click and drag inside of the scene view, and it's moving the camera around in the game view. There we go. That's it. Okay, that's interesting. So it looks like that issue occurred probably because of the way that I'm checking for focus. Oh, what just happened? Oh, okay. Hang on. I'm getting myself all confused. So I think what's happening is that if this is in focus, it's supposed to be capturing input, and I explicitly have it ignoring input if I'm clicking and dragging on the title bar. But if I have the window in focus, but another tab up, I think it's still responding to input. Or it was when I was... Okay, I guess it only happens with the scene view, because the scene view is... Oh, because the scene view is not blocking input. Okay, I'll deal with this issue later. I'm ready to go. Thanks for joining me today. Have a great rest of your day, or night, or morning, or whatever time zone. I'll probably be back on tomorrow with this. I might be on later tonight to play a game. See you later.